Well, good morning, everyone, once again. To those joining us here in the sanctuary and to those who are joining us via the live stream and will watch the recording in the next several days. Welcome to week one of Navigating Artificial Intelligence, or AI, in the Christian life. As always, I'd like to begin with a word of prayer to dedicate this study and our time together to God first and foremost. Gracious God, we are humbled and thankful to gather together to intersect our stories, our lives with the living, breathing word that comes to us in Holy Scripture. And as we study Scripture in light of our present context and the challenges before us through artificial intelligence, give us the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of discernment, the spirit of prudence and meekness, so that we may best be your faithful people in this day and age. Give us wisdom, give us courage for the facing of this hour. And it is in the name of Jesus Christ that we dedicate ourselves, our time, and this study to you. Amen. Amen. Well, good morning, Scott and Neela.
I had to get her. She was going to the office.
Oh, okay. I wondered if anybody would do that today. So I want to get us started this morning by asking a couple of open-ended questions. There's no right or wrong answers. And so the first thing is, when you think of the book of Daniel, what do you think of? What do you know about the book of Daniel in the Bible?
The childhood story, Daniel and the Lion's Den.
Daniel and the Lion's Den. Yep. Yes. Anything else? Yeah, so from the beginning, we are told that Daniel and his, what I call confreres, are young. We don't know exactly how young, but we would have to say they were considerably young if that's one of the first things or first words to describe them.
That God is our hope and we can trust in Him through all of our trials, that He can see us through for a greater purpose, and He can use us if we obey.
Yeah, greater purpose that comes through faithfulness and obedience. Anything else about the book of Daniel that you immediately think of? Do what? The fiery furnace. Yes, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace. We'll be talking about that next week, Daniel chapter 3. And yeah, so that's obviously one of those Sunday school stories. And it always amazes me, like, why do we tell these in Sunday school? Why would we tell our children a story about three men getting thrown into a blazing furnace or being thrown into a pit filled with lions? You know, this is the stuff nightmares are made of, but yet we teach it in Sunday school.
Well, like in Revelation, there's a lot of symbolism.
Right.
With the statue,
Yeah.
Iron.
Yeah, so Daniel, like the book of Revelation, is one of the few places in Scripture that uses a genre of writing called apocalypse. And it is conveying a known truth through a veiled symbolic language. And so it's pretty interesting that you say that, because the first things that we think of, Daniel and the Lion's Den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the youthfulness, all of that is in Daniel chapters 1 through 6, the first half of the book. But the dreams, the crazy visions are more confined to the latter half of the book. So when we get to the second half of the study, don't drop out, because you're like, what in the world is happening here? What do I do with this? That's why we study together. That's why we study in community, so don't let that scare you. But yes, it is filled with dreams and visions and symbolic apocalyptic kind of language, yes. Anything else? Okay, so let me ask you another question. How have you, perhaps unintentionally, interacted with artificial intelligence? Can you think of something in your own life where you realize, like, hey, this was generated by artificial intelligence and I didn't realize it? Or I've been using it and I didn't know it. Anything come to mind?
Anything on social media.
That's the biggest one. Yeah, social media. How many AI-generated posts and pictures and videos that are made to look convincingly real sometimes. Right. Anytime you use Google, the first thing that comes up is an AI overview. Yeah.
When I text, I get a text from somebody and it gives me a suggested answer to send back to them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Rita?
I had to call a credit card company the other day, and they said right up front that it was AI. And I go,
Yeah.
I want to talk to somebody.
Right.
It was an option.
Right. Actually,
And they ended up hanging up on me. I don't know if they got the information.
yeah, I actually had a similar example not that long ago. I had to call a plumber to come out and look at a drain at the house, and I had a lovely conversation with Diego to schedule my appointment, and it turns out that Diego was an AI bot that they used to schedule all of their appointments. And I had to pause and realize, like, I'm talking to a computer right now.
How'd that make you feel? Was that
I didn't like it very much. I would have much rather talked to a real person. Yeah.
Confession, I intentionally did it about 2 weeks ago. I have 3 people in my family with ADHD, and I decided, I always said I wish I could just get inside their heads for 24 hours and see what it was like, but I cannot do that. So the best thing to do is to educate yourself. So I got online and asked, what is the best book that I can read? And I explained my situation, blah, blah, blah. That I can learn about how they want to be treated and what it's from. And do you want to use ChatGPT for this? So I went, yes. And it gave me like 4 definitions and gave me the number 1 book. And I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Great example.
But the administration in Washington has artificial intelligence because they have no real intelligence.
Well, so actually that's another big. We'll actually talk more about this next week, but governments around the world are using artificial intelligence in the decision-making process. And in fact, I'll say more about this next week, but Albania actually has an AI bot that has been appointed by the president to sit on his cabinet. Yeah. In fact, give me a second because I wrote down some information about it. Yeah, Albania appointed the world's first AI government official. The prime minister had the bot named Diella join his cabinet as, quote, the Minister for Public Procurement. Yeah.
AI, when I think about it, think about the movie 2001: A Space
Yeah.
Odyssey and that talking computer.
Yeah.
So that's
So it's almost like sci-fi. It almost has a sci-fi feel to it. I actually encountered it again last week unknowingly. I went to the dentist, and they had to take x-rays. And I was looking at the screen in front of me when my x-rays came up, and there were like these dots. And I'm like, what are those dots for? And they were like, we use AI to detect early signs of decay so that we can reverse the process to avoid the drill. Now, granted, it costs $300 and it's not covered by insurance, but am I going to drop $300 to avoid Novocaine and a drill? Absolutely. And then on Sunday morning, I'm a New York Times subscriber and I get the paper Sunday morning edition. And this past Sunday, this was sitting in my driveway. On the front page, there's an article, "Students lose much more than grammar skills when they use AI to write." There's another article in Sunday Business, "Silicon Valley confronts AI. Big tech is trying to dig out of the heap of artificial intelligence slop filling its platforms, but many of the companies trying to manage the low-quality content are also enabling it." Front page of the New York Times features 2 articles about artificial intelligence. And then I go on to church and do my thing at University Heights, and I get on 465 to come here and do round 2. And there is a massive billboard on 465 for the University of Indianapolis's new Master's in Business Administration in AI and Analytics. Next to it was another billboard featuring TJ McConnell promoting Crew Car Wash. The next one was Lilly's billboard for their new GLP-1 drug. Welcome to Indianapolis, everyone. So, I mean, it was right there. Yeah.
This morning on the news, now I took this as good news. On the local news, they had a lady from Purdue University there, and they are now going to start requiring every student to take a course in AI before they graduate. And the reason is because they want to teach them how to use it responsibly. Mm-hmm. They're trying to, it's not so they can,
Yeah. Last month, I was given the opportunity to speak to a group of teenagers. And this is where I think is the segue you're alluding to that I think is the impetus for this entire study. I was talking to this group of teenagers, high schoolers, that were a part of a service learning project through the University of Indianapolis. And I was invited to come and speak to them about things like purpose, calling, things beyond job, right? What is your purpose in life? What is your calling? What is your vocation? And I was starting to talk about this, and a teenager on the front row in the classroom blurts out, "Who cares about any of this, because it's all going to be taken over by AI in the next decade anyway. What's the point of having a vocation? What's the point of having a purpose? What's the point of having a..." This is a teenager. And so the conversation quickly turned to, what do you have to offer the world that a computer cannot replace? This is the conversation I'm having with teenagers, right? And so, in a sense, it's everywhere. It's looming over us. No matter how much we try to avoid it, we can't. Whether we go to the dentist, whether we call a plumber, whether we call a credit card company, whether we do a simple Google search with our phones, or drive along 465. AI is always in front of us. And for this reason, I actually want to start in Daniel chapter 2. So if you did bring a Bible with you, feel free to turn there or use the Bible in the pews. Daniel chapter 2. Please know that I welcome different translations. I think that having different translations at Bible study is very helpful. And chances are I'm going to be using a translation that's different from the ones you brought too. Daniel chapter 2 depicts Nebuchadnezzar having a very vivid dream that he forgets about. And it's the dream of an enormous statue that is made of gold and then silver, bronze, iron, with feet of clay, mixed with iron, and interpreters have dissected this passage ad nauseum, talking about what each part represents and what it all means. And I'm not going to focus on that part. But what I find so interesting is that Nebuchadnezzar can't remember what he dreamt. And so he calls, at least in my translation, look at verse 2. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans show up quite a bit in Daniel. And you might be wondering, who are they? The Chaldeans were a nomadic tribe, a nomadic people group that settled in Babylon and slowly became royal court officials that served as almost counselors to the Babylonian king. Okay, so whenever you see the word Chaldeans, you can almost replace it with royal counselors. Okay? For to show the king his dreams, so they came and stood before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar gives them an incredibly impossible request. He does not say, "Here's my dream, interpret it." That would have been easy. Babylonian culture, that was their bread and butter. That's what they did. But Nebuchadnezzar says, "I can't remember what I dreamt, so I need you to tell me not only the interpretation, but I need you to tell me the dream itself." No request has ever been made like that before. And so the Chaldeans and the sorcerers and the astrologers and the mages, they stall and they go back and forth. And I don't know if you picked up on this, and I'm sure you will as you keep reading. Nebuchadnezzar must have been a rageaholic. He is constantly furious. He's constantly angry. And so when the Chaldeans cannot answer him, and they even say, "You've asked us to do the impossible," Nebuchadnezzar flies into a furious rage and demands that all of them be killed. And that's when Daniel and his confreres say, "Hold on, let's try one more thing." And sometimes I think it's pretty easy to see ourselves in this story. It's easy to see our present context in this event. Because maybe some of you feel like King Nebuchadnezzar. When it comes to AI, here is this enormous reality in front of us. And yet, we're not only asking, what does this even mean? We're wondering, what is this? What is it? What does it all mean? Or maybe sometimes we can feel like the mages and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans. And we're being asked, what is this? What does it all mean? And we're like, I don't know. It's impossible. We feel at a loss, like it's impossible to figure out. And this is especially true, and I have to say this is especially true in church life, especially when it comes to us clergy. Many of us are wondering all of these things ourselves, completely at a loss for words, and yet we pretend like we do. Not only that, but to make matters worse, a Wall Street Journal article last month reported that approximately 50%, half, of all clergy in the United States regularly rely on generative artificial intelligence to write their sermons each week. Half. So not only do most clergy not have answers to the big AI questions, but they regularly participate in it and contribute to the bigger problem. And the reasons why also pointed to much greater problems. Because when clergy were interviewed and asked why they had ChatGPT or some other generative AI platform write their sermons for them week after week, their responses were exactly what you might expect. I'm just too busy. I don't have time to write a sermon anymore, which speaks to a much greater issue. We all have the same number of hours in a week. But the other reason I read that also made me want to bang my head on my desk was I rely on AI because it can produce something better than I can produce on my own. What does that say about our clergy and preaching today?
That they don't do anything with their own mind.
Well, and I also think that what does that say about our seminary education? Presuming they did go to seminary. Do clergy not have the skills to prepare a quality sermon to give to the flock each week? Apparently not. So that they feel like they have to rely on it. And when I say rely, I'm not saying that they write out their notes or their manuscript and upload it and say, can you polish this for me? They go on generative AI and say, I need a 20-minute sermon on this scripture. Please include these themes. Oh, by the way, I'm a United Methodist, so a John Wesley quote or two would be helpful. And in seconds, they've got it.
It used to be in college, if you plagiarized something, you were expelled, and what they're doing is they're plagiarizing the AI.
Yeah, because what does generative AI do? It pulls from other sermons and materials that clergy and other websites and all these resources have provided, and they've generated something using all of that clergy are using and presenting as their own.
So that's their God.
In a way, it's become their God. Yeah.
The reverse is also becoming true in education. My daughter is back in school.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's always in school. And she has a class where she writes things out, and she said there's some type of, something you can run your paper through to determine whether it was AI or not.
Mm-hmm.
Hers comes out 0. Her response from her instructor comes out like 99%.
Mm.
So the instructors are using it too in some cases,
Right.
which
Yeah.
makes her extra angry that
Right.
she's not using it at all.
Right, and not only that, so the questions of reliability and accuracy are a huge thing. AI is used in the healthcare industry. And I recently heard the story of a mother and daughter going to a doctor's appointment, so a doctor taking her mother to the doctor, and the provider used artificial intelligence to generate tests that were supposed to be for her mother, but were written as for the daughter instead. Yeah. So it just made this huge error. And it just generated a mess that they had to get all sorted out, which would have been completely avoided had they not used it at all. Right? I'm not saying mistakes can't happen, but those sorts of mistakes are unlikely to happen. Sandy.
Well, this is more back to the ministers and clergy using AI. You've mentioned before that what that does is it takes out the work of the Holy Spirit
Right.
by using something artificial, and God
Right.
works with the original.
Right. Yeah. That's what I said. I said, does God use AI? No, God does not use anything artificial. God uses what is authentic and original, especially that which is created in His image. Yeah. Hold on to that word, image, because it's going to come up repeatedly in the book of Daniel. And the word image that we see in the book of Daniel is the same word in Hebrew and Aramaic when God says in Genesis, let us make man in our image. Okay? That word image is the same. So we're going to lean into that a little bit. But needless to say, what this conversation shows is that people are hungry for clarity over how AI continues to affect our lives. And in some cases, their hunger has turned into anger. In other words, they become hangry. Like King Nebuchadnezzar, they become angry and very furious. And maybe you also have wondered, where is God in all of this? How will God be revealed to his people and through his people in the face of uncertainty and flux? And that's why the book of Daniel is so important. So, if you read the introduction to Pope Leo's book, Magnificent Humanity, then you may remember that he alludes to two biblical events, and neither one of them are the book of Daniel. Do you remember the two biblical events he refers to in the introduction?
Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel in Genesis 11. In fact, will someone volunteer to turn to Genesis 11? Can I get a hand? To those, okay, Lorraine, I see that hand. See, I've got to sound like a Baptist preacher. I see that hand, right? And if someone will go ahead and open to Daniel 1. So Pope Leo XIV, beginning with paragraph 7, on page 15, gives us two biblical images on how to navigate responsibly the era of AI. The construction of the Tower of Babel and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem in the book of Nehemiah, chapters 2 through 6. And so I want to explain why these two images are important and how the book of Daniel fits in. Lorraine, do you have Genesis 11 pulled up, opened? Genesis 11.
Oh, I had 1 through 9. Okay, yes, I do.
Okay, if you can read Genesis 11:1, just verse 1.
Just verse 1.
Uh-huh.
Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved, that's it. Sorry.
Okay, continue reading into verse 2.
Go to read it, okay.
Uh-huh.
As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, will someone read Daniel 1, verses 1 and 2? Sandy, thank you.
In the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. These he brought to the land of Shinar and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God.
So do you notice something similar between those four verses? It's the location. Shinar. Yeah, both of them mention the land of Shinar. And in Genesis 11, Shinar was the region where the Tower of Babel is said to be constructed. And in Daniel 1, after the fall of Jerusalem to King Nebuchadnezzar, he carries off the sacred vessels from the temple into the land of Shinar, into the house of his God. His God could have been Bel, which is a famous Babylonian god. It could have also been Nabu, which is another Babylonian god, and Nebuchadnezzar bears the name of that god. So we don't know exactly whose god Nebuchadnezzar is, but it certainly isn't the God of Israel. So here we are in the land of Shinar, in the land of Babel. Now, in verse 1, it says, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came unto Jerusalem and besieged it. In Hebrew, it says Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So why are we studying the book of Daniel? Because we are in the land of Babel, right on the cusp of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Because at the end of the Babylonian exile, King Cyrus of Persia gives the Jews permission to return to Jerusalem to rebuild. That's where the books of Ezra and Nehemiah come in. And so Daniel is situated in between the two biblical images that Pope Leo XIV give us. And it has a lot to say about how we navigate faithfully God's will in between those two images of Babylon and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Any further thoughts or questions? I thought it was very interesting, if you have your copy of Pope Leo's book on page 16, still in paragraph 7, in talking about Babel, he said they sought to guarantee stability and power for themselves, and above all, to make a name for themselves. Babel was an impressive feat. A single language, a single technology, a single direction. However, the project concealed a profound danger. It was a project conceived without reference to God, supported by a uniformity that eliminated diversity and that chose homogenization over communion. And then later on, down the paragraph, Leo says, the result is not unity, but dispersion. Sandy.
You know, when we were talking about AI and what the future's going to look like, one of the thoughts that popped up in my mind is, how often are we going to be communicating even face-to-face to people with robots? It may be that 95% of our life is computer-generated interactions, and the
Yeah.
only face-to-face interactions we have on regular, typical days would be with family in the household.
Right.
I mean, you might even have your robot doing your cleaning and,
Like Rosie from the Jetsons, right?
robot doing the cooking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say a huge percentage of our communication already isn't face-to-face.
So it's just going to get worse. And
Yeah.
what does that say about our relations?
Yeah.
Relational.
So I mean, it really is a huge question. And so here's where I think all of this ties in to the bigger question of how do we navigate this as God's people faithfully. First things first, the purpose of Babel was to make a name for themselves. I don't know if you know this, but Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those are the four Hebrew children named in chapter 1. Did you know that all four of those names mean something in Hebrew? And their meanings show up throughout the book of Daniel. So here's the meanings. If you want to write them down, I'll go slow enough. Daniel means, my judge is God. Daniel, my judge is God. Hananiah means the Lord is gracious. The Lord is gracious. Mishael, this one's my favorite. because it's actually a question. Mishael means who is what God is. Who is what God is. And then Azariah means the Lord has helped. The Lord has helped. But their names were changed. The chief warden, in my translation, it says the prince of eunuchs, in King Nebuchadnezzar's court, changes their names. Daniel becomes Belshazzar. Hananiah becomes Shadrach. Mishael becomes Meshach. And Azariah becomes Abednego. Now, all four of those names have no meaning at all in either Babylonian, Chaldean, or Hebrew. Those names are literally Babel. Pun very much intended. So their meaning, remember, in this day and age, in the Hebrew culture, your name told the world who you were. It was your identity. So in changing their names, their identity, what made them who they are, was stripped from them. Let that sink in. We are dealing with a reality that its aim is to strip us as human beings what makes us human beings. The things that give our lives meaning are being willfully handed over to a computer. So this is exactly what we're dealing with. Scott, let me finish one more thing, and then I'll because I don't want to miss this. But here's the most amazing thing. And here's the challenge. If someone would read the opening statement of verse 7 of Daniel 1, verse 7. Just the opening line, yeah.
The palace master gave them other names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called, and Abednego he called him Azariah.
So, yes. So the palace guard gave names. Okay? So, and then if someone will read the opening statement, just the first 5 or 6 words of verse 8.
But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. So he asked that the palace master to allow him not to defile himself.
Thank you. So here's what gets lost in English but gets retained in Hebrew. And I said I wasn't going to load it down with Hebrew, but this is just too good not to point out. The verb gave names in verse 7 and the verb resolved, or in some translations it may say something like purposed or determined or something like that, right? Those are the same word. And determined is the best translation. So the prince of the eunuchs determined that Daniel would be called Belshazzar and so forth. And then in verse 8, Daniel determined in his heart that he would not defile himself. So, and this is the important part, no matter what was determined for Daniel, Daniel still determined for himself. Daniel still drew the line somewhere, that he would not defile himself with the king's meat and the king's wine. Why is that important? Torah does not forbid the eating of meat or the drinking of wine. Thanks be to God. But these were privileges from the king that were not afforded to Daniel's confreres. These were not privileges afforded to the rest of the exiles in Babylon. And so by refusing to participate in these privileges, Daniel was standing in solidarity with his other exiled captives. And so it should make us ask that in the name of sacred resistance, sacred refusal, sacred rejection, how by not participating in the privilege that is AI, how is refusing that allowing us to stand in solidarity with peoples and people groups whose lives have been negatively affected by the rapid rise of artificial intelligence? Scott.
The question or statement I had was when you were saying the Jewish names had meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were given these names at birth, did the parents or the child, whatever, how did that name come about at birth? How did they know that Daniel, was going to fulfill that name? How were those names chosen for those infants? Maybe that's too
Yeah.
question. I don't know.
So it depends. We have different examples. Sometimes, and we even see this in the New Testament, the names were divinely revealed. The names were John the Baptist, Jesus. Their names were revealed by God. There were other times in the Old Testament when names were chosen based upon the casting of lots, believing that God spoke through that. So really, a person's name was chosen along with divine consultation. And notice in the Old Testament, whenever in a Hebrew context there is a name change, it is God that changes it. Nobody changes their own name. Jacob becomes Israel because God says so. Naomi becomes Mara because God says so.
Saul becomes Paul.
Well, that one's a little bit different because Saul is his Jewish name, Paul is his Roman name. And so as he journeyed throughout the Roman Empire, he used his Roman name as a Roman citizen. Yeah, it wasn't a name change. It was basically, here are two names that I can use interchangeably depending on my context. Yeah. So basically, but what I love is when God changes someone's name, it is because of a greater purpose, a greater identity. And yet here, when the palace guard changes names, it's basically changing it to nothingness. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Oh, well, as I told my Sunday night crew, I'll tell you, my problem here with week 1 is not that I didn't prepare enough. I over-prepared, and I have 12 pages of handwritten notes. And I just know we're not going to get through everything. So basically, I want to teach you what you want to know out of Daniel chapters 1 and chapters 2. Chapters 1 and 2. So Daniel purposes himself that he will not defile himself with the king's privileges in order to remain faithful to God and to God's people. And that faithfulness carries into chapter 2. So we've already talked somewhat about Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Did you also happen to notice that Pope Leo, so we're going back and forth a little bit. I thought it was very interesting that Pope Leo called the construction of the Tower of Babel as a project conceived without reference to God. a project conceived without reference to God.
I have that highlighted.
And I will say that AI is not a project that has been conceived without reference to God. Next week, I will share quotes from early AI enthusiasts and developers. God does get mentioned, and it will make your skin crawl. Just wait. But we're not there yet. We're still in chapter 2. So did you happen to notice when Nebuchadnezzar is going back and forth with the Chaldeans about what does the dream mean, what does all of this entail, and tell me what I dreamt and tell me what it means? The Chaldeans say in verse 11, Daniel chapter 2, "It is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." And from there, the Chaldeans never once appeal to the gods for help. They never once ask their deities, their gods, for assistance in this matter, because their gods dwelt outside of this world and did not interact with human affairs. They did not come to the assistance of human beings. So, this whole situation is a project without anyone referring to God until Daniel. What does Daniel do? First thing, he gets King Nebuchadnezzar to give him some time. All right, don't take us all to the chopping block just yet. Buy us a little time, and King Nebuchadnezzar agrees. Miraculously. The rageaholic is having a good day. What do you know? That evening, Daniel went to his house, this is verse 17, and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire the mercies of God. Literally, that they would appeal to the mercies of God, the God of heaven, concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And then verses 20 through 23 are an incredible, what scholars call a doxology. Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his, and he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made known to me now what we desired of you. For you have now made known unto us the king's matter." There is a lot packed into those 3 verses, aren't there? If you go back and you read the whole debacle between the Chaldeans and the king Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldeans say that wisdom is said to belong to them, the experts summoned by the king. And the king is said to have all power. But all wisdom and power belong to God. Nebuchadnezzar accuses the Chaldeans of trying to gain time, and then also Daniel buys time from him. But God is the one who changes the times and the seasons. The Chaldeans say that the king is to live forever, but Daniel blesses God's name forever and ever. Even the king is subject to the God who removes kings and sets up kings. God is the source of wisdom and knowledge, who reveals secrets and mysteries. Daniel's doxology says that God is God and Nebuchadnezzar is not. God is the source of all wisdom, and the Chaldeans have nothing to stand on. And I think that's the good news for us. That when these powerful realities arise in our world, filling the world and society with uncertainty and flux, we rest on something greater. Our trust is set on something greater, and that is that God is God and AI is not. And that AI does not possess all wisdom and knowledge. We can see all the sloppy results that it generates, so we know that. But all of that comes from God. And God has, and this is the difference between the Babylonians' God and Israel's God. The Babylonians' God is set to live out there somewhere, and they don't meddle in human affairs. But God comes to the aid of those who call upon Him. God is entirely transcendent, yes, because remember, God is God and we are not. God is God, AI is not God. But God is also immanent. God is also near at hand to those who call upon His name, to those who bless His name, to those who desire to live in His presence and be faithful to His will, even when it requires courage. And so that's really the good news, the gospel, for us in Daniel chapters 1 and 2. I'll pause to see if there are any questions or comments. Whew.
I got a question.
Okay.
I got this book and I'm reading. I'm trying to understand it, and it uses great big words that doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But where in everything I read in this book do I get that I'm supposed to go to the book of Daniel? It's not even mentioned.
It's not. So
So how am I supposed to study it? I mean, I'm glad you're here to explain. That's
Right.
what your job is.
that's exactly right.
But I'm just trying, because I'm sitting there going, what's all this Daniel? I'm
Right.
trying to read this book I can't understand.
Right.
Because you use words that I don't.
Yeah, you kind of have to use a dictionary for some of them, don't you?
Yes, for most of them.
Yeah. So I know one of...
I'm just curious.
Yeah. So basically, in fact, let me answer that in just a moment, because there's some housekeeping things that, looking towards next week that might answer your question. Okay? Anita, you had your hand raised.
My thought was, some of this kind of reminds me of, and it's humans that have created AI and human programmers that make the robots do what they do. In some respects, it reminds me of the religious people who won't follow modern medicine, because they say, God will take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just need to know when you use the assistance of AI, and like you said, when it's good and when you...
Yeah. So here is the best way. So we actually discussed this on Zoom Sunday night, and here's the differentiation I think we need to rest on, okay? No matter what we do, I'm not going to tell people what to do. I've made the personal decision for myself that I will not use generative AI. I'm not going to go on ChatGPT and type in queries. I'm not going to go on to any other platform and type in an inquiry and let it generate an answer for me. There are other ways I can't avoid it. I still have to go to the dentist. I still need a plumber sometimes. But there is a sense that, and this is what Pope Leo is going to drive home, is that AI is not going to go away, at least not for right now. Can it be used as a tool to enhance human life? Or will it be used as a tool to essentially replace human life? Now, I know that sounds really dark and almost sci-fi, almost psychedelic, but I think it's an important question to ask, because there's a difference between a tool that we work with and a tool that does the work for us. And up until now, religion and technology have kind of grown up together. And sometimes religion's relationship with advancement and technology and science has not always been on par. I mean, we've seen some pretty dark examples in history. But up until now, both have been concerned with the flourishing of human life, to enhance human life. Mike, you were a carpenter by trade. Would you rather use a manual screwdriver 24/7 to do your job, or would you prefer to use a power drill? Yeah. It's a lot easier to use a power tool. It helps us do our job more effectively and efficiently. Now, we still have to operate it, just like we do a screwdriver. The power drill isn't going to do the work for us. We still have a part to play. It's a tool that we use, that we work with. It doesn't do the work for us. And so I think that's where we've got to bear in mind that responsible, going to the Purdue reference, responsible use of AI is using it as a tool that we can work with rather than, like 50% of U.S. clergy, letting it do the work for them. Okay, I said I was going to tell you, I was going to save this until next week. But I'll give you some quotes, and I'll refer to them again next week. Here are 3 quotes from 3 individuals, David Sevier, Pamela McCordick, and Rudy Rucker, all about artificial intelligence, okay? Artificial intelligence advocates wax eloquent about the possibilities of machine-based immortality and resurrection. And their disciples, the architects of virtual reality and cyberspace, exult in their expectation of godlike omnipresence and disembodied perfection. Pamela McCordick. The enterprise of artificial intelligence is a godlike one. The invention, the finding within of gods represents our reach for the transcendent. Rudy Rucker. The manifest destiny of humankind is to pass the torch of life and intelligence on to the computer. Again, sit with those long enough and your skin starts to crawl. What makes it even more skin crawling is that all 3 of these quotes were said in 1988. None of this is new. This has been on the horizon for a long time. I'll give you another one. Sam Altman, who founded OpenAI, the platform that owns ChatGPT. He said in 2013, successful people create companies. More successful people create countries. The most successful people create religions. I heard this from Key Lee, a computer engineer, a famous computer engineer. But Sam Altman says, it got me thinking, though, the most successful founders do not set out to create companies. They are on a mission to create something closer to a religion. And at some point, it turns out that forming a company is the easiest way to form a religion. It's the founder of OpenAI, 13 years ago. So really, what we're confronted with is not just a technology. In some ways, we're being confronted with a new worldview, a new way of understanding and seeing the world. So, how do we navigate that? So we're not going to answer all the questions. Certainly not going to answer all of them, but we're not going to answer them in week 1 either. Now, in the time that we have left, I want to go back to Mike's question. If you found the opening pages of this book somewhat difficult, complete with words and terminology that you've never heard before, please know that's okay. I kind of figured that was going to happen. I'm not expecting you all to be experts in synodality. Synodality just means journeying together. I will remind you that this was an encyclical written by a living pope to the Roman Catholic Church. We're not Roman Catholics. We're Protestants. We're Methodists. And sometimes it's very interesting to hear about our grandparents' stories, and sometimes it leaves us scratching our heads. Whenever you find terminology, here's what I'm going to recommend. If you come across terminology that is uniquely Roman Catholic, if you find it interesting, then I would encourage you to perhaps look it up and do some more study around that. But we're not going to be focusing on the Roman Catholic emphasis here. It's not to say we can't glean anything from it, but basically what I'm asking you to do as you read this, if you come across that, just keep reading. Don't dwell on it. What I'm asking you to focus on instead are the big idea concepts of how artificial intelligence and humanity intersect. And so that's what I encourage you to look for as you read the book. That's also what I encourage you to look for as you read the book of Daniel. Because in this book, Daniel and his confreres are encountering something entirely new. A new country, a new language, a new reality, and they're confronted with enormous realities. Sometimes they come in dreams and visions. And so how does Daniel intersect humanity in with all of that and bring God into it too? And that's what our task is. That's what both of them is. That's what both this book and the book of Daniel are trying to do, is in the face of what we might call monstrous realities, how do we as human beings live faithfully before God in light of these new monstrous realities? Does that make sense? So with that, next week, we will be studying chapters 3 and 4 of the book of Daniel. Chapter 3 is the familiar Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story. So that one should be somewhat familiar to you. And so but definitely read it. Some of you may have not read it since you were in Sunday school, so it's not really one that really comes up all too often in worship services. And then here's where you have my permission. The next two chapters, chapters 1 and 2, in Pope Leo's book will be emphasizing our discussion for next week. Now, some of you may be saying, well, that's a lot of reading. Yeah, it is. So you have my permission, if you want, to skip chapter 1. Chapter 1 is sort of distinctly Roman Catholic stuff. It's history. It's basically setting the framework for what follows. Again, if you find any of that interesting, feel free to read it or skim it. But you certainly don't have to, because as part of our discussion next week, there are big themes in chapter 2 that we're going to be taking a closer look at. So as you read chapter 2, identify those themes and kind of ponder those. And maybe not get bogged down in what the magisterium has said or the finer points of the Roman Catholic Church's social doctrine, those sorts of things. Unless you really want to. I'm a church nerd, so I love diving down into those rabbit holes. So, but I know I'm not going to ask everyone else to either. I hope that somewhat helps to answer your question, Mike. Anything else? By the way, I'm trusting that all of you can read cursive handwriting. I decided a long time ago that when preparing this Bible study, I was going to be use technology as minimally as possible. So you can better believe I'm not using AI for this, but not only that, I'm not even using a computer. It is old school, legal pad, fountain pen, writing in cursive. I mean, you can see, these are my notes. I am very happy to share them. So if you would like a copy of them, I will scan them in and email them to you. So you may be...
Can I add to that? If you haven't seen his handwriting, it looks like it's in a Hallmark card.
I promise you will be able to read it.
Handwriting,
It is legible, I promise.
I could never do that.
So with that, I think we're off to a pretty interesting start. This is some pretty big, deep stuff. And I am very excited to see where this study takes us. And so I want to close with one more theme and let it be our prayer. In Daniel chapter 1, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are referred to as well-favored, skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge and understanding science. The Hebrew term for this is maskilim, wise ones. And that word appears throughout the Old Testament. And so may God make us maskilim, those who witness to a hope beyond the limitations of this world. May God make us maskilim, so that we may be well-versed both in the ways of God and knowledgeable of the ways of the world in order to be wise. May we be maskilim, those who seek and trust God, those who are thoughtful regarding the weak, those who are prudent in speech and action, those who are people without power of their own. Whatever power or success we have it only by the will of God. May we be maskilim, who do not follow the way of zealotry, rather promote understanding. May God make us maskilim. Amen.